Well, the pandemic has changed the relationship between employers and employees, with the latter now expecting more from their leaders. For those who may be struggling to retain staff, it's never been more important to fix the culture within the workplace. Anton Guinea is our resident workplace expert and joins us on the line. Anton, good morning.
Yeah, morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me. As always, mate, great to chat.
Is this really the case, though? I mean, is it about workplace culture, or is it just that we've all become a little bit precious and expect more than we deserve in the workplace?
And it's probably a bit from column A and a bit from column B, Stephen. Like, we do know that the pandemic and what's happened over the last couple of years has changed, and get this, in the words of research, the psychology of workers, right?
Yep.
Which is that's a broad, that's a massive term, right? To say that this thing has changed the way that employees think globally. And that's massive. And so what does that mean? Does it mean that we become more entitled and we expect more from our leaders? Probably. Does it mean we get a bit precious when we don't get that? Probably. Who's left in the middle? The leaders who are charged with managing the psychology of their people, whether they're entitled or whether they're not. So the answer to your question is a bit from both ways, but who's in the middle of the leaders, and what they're really tasked with doing is building a culture where we look after the psychology of our workers, and it's actually called psychological safety, and that's a term that's been around for a few decades now. And it's not crazy, it's not a big thing, Stephen, it's just about hearing your employees, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, though, I mean, I talk to a lot of employers here in Canberra that are struggling to get staff, and particularly in the hospitality industry. We're hearing stories out of Sydney where, dishwashers are being paid $90 an hour, etc. And, I'm all for somebody getting $90 an hour if they can, but there seems to be a lack of realism in a lot of expectations these days.
And that's the business cycle, isn't it? It's the supply and demand. And I wonder whether there's part of this psychology changing is we expect more in different industries, right? So hospitality got hit so hard during the pandemic, and it's one area where I feel like it's like the real estate market where it bounces back, and it's just bounced back, in a really strange way with such high prices, because supply and demand, we just can't get people to work in hospitality much anymore because their jobs are so unsafe. And see, that's a psychological change too. We sort of see roles now or jobs as not like an entry-level job at Macca's now. We're not willing to do that sometimes as young people, because we're seeing this whole millennial age wanting more sooner. All of a sudden, they don't want to go and wash dishes. Well, they probably will now that they can get that sort of money.
Yeah. But
they want to be the manager already. Do you know what I mean? And so there's this, yeah.
So how do we address that expectation? Because that's unsustainable.
Oh, absolutely. And look, this is my prediction. So I spoke at the Bundaberg, actually where they make the rum, last week at the Chamber of Commerce, and I talked about my predictions for leadership in 2022, and they're really around inclusion and diversity, and they're really around how we actually engage with people to change their expectations, and I don't know about lower them, but to make them more realistic in this current age and in this current world. And I even talked about things like technology, how technology is changing. We have to somehow embrace technology, but not let it take over our lives. And so back to your original question, how do we actually change these expectations? And I think it's a societal thing where we, as parents, the whole, and this is societal, we give participation awards, how all of that sort of stuff is really changed the resilience level of young people who are coming into the workforce, Stephen. I think the whole change that we're seeing is really around where we start our lives and how we're actually bringing people into the workforce. So my lovely wife's a teacher, so she teaches grade 6 now, and I've got to tell you, and she would hate me saying this on national radio, but she's seeing this whole change in kids over time. And the big word that she uses regularly is resilience. So here's the challenge. People come into the workforce with these high expectations, and when they don't get them, how do they respond, Stephen?
Yeah.
It's like their world's falling over.
But it's a little bit like putting the toothpaste back into the tube, unfortunately. And I remember in a previous life, I was managed a group of sort of 20-somethings, and I remember one of them who I had to call out on some poor work product at one stage, and he actually said to me with a straight face, "I'm a millennial. You can't tell me that I've done something wrong." And it was a belief that he honestly held, that he couldn't be told that he'd done anything wrong in his life. I don't know how you change that. And, well, I mean, you can gradually try to change it, but it's a long time turning that around.
Oh, absolutely, mate. And I think it's a leadership thing, right? And leaders like you who are willing to have those conversations are the strongest and the best leaders, because they're willing to pull people on and say, listen, unfortunately as leaders, our job's getting harder and harder, mate. You imagine what it was like then for you managing 20-year-olds. Now it's following a pandemic. It's even harder, because now not only you can't tell them they're wrong, you can't tell them that they need to come to an office now even. You know what I mean? You can't tell them where they got to work.
We talk about this great resignation or whatever it is, or don't quote me on the technology, but the terminology.
That's the word.
But, I mean, at some point, the great resignation is going to turn into a whole bunch of unemployed people. Maybe there's a wake-up call coming.
Look, 100, I'm with you. I think it's like the housing market. Again, I just use it as a business. Mate, I've got to tell you, I think it's going to turn around, and all of a sudden, in a couple of years' time, we're going to be talking about people not wanting to leave, and that we can't get people to leave organisations. That's what I think is going to happen, is because we're going to get to a point where we actually want some certainty. It's an actual human trait. It's a human need to actually have some certainty in our life, and I think in some ways at the moment people are sort of starting to cry out for that, and they're looking for that certainty from another employer. They're looking for this nirvana from another employee because they don't have it where they are now. I think we're going to go back to the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and I think eventually we will see that.
Yeah, if only we can get back to a situation where work ethic is built into that too. Anton,
well said, mate.
Always good to talk to you, mate. We'll catch up again soon.
Love your work, Stephen. Thanks,
Cheers, mate. Anton Guinea, expert in leading under pressure. He'll be back with us on the program at some stage.